when the ideas come from the shop floor up, they're definitely better accepted by everybody, and and people understand that we're listening to what they have to say and helping them find ways to do their job better. And so, those are usually the best ideas that we get. The stuff that comes from the top down, not so much.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. We have Alan Ortner, CEO of Sirois Tool, on today. Alan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, it's my pleasure, Alan. It's the Made in America podcast, though, so we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
Well, we make precision tools, fixtures, gauges for other manufacturers, and some low-volume, complex precision parts.
And why do we do it, Alan?
Because our customers need it.
That's a great answer. Got to give the customers what they want, right?
Exactly.
Listen, I love to hear people's stories about how they sort of got into the business. What's the background on Sirois Tool in general, and kind of your journey into manufacturing?
Well, Sirois Tool was started in 1960 by Bob Sirois. Bob had apprenticed as a tool maker at Pratt Whitney and left and went out on his own in 1960. He started the company, and then he grew it. Started out making cutting tools for Pratt Whitney, but expanded that and eventually got into the bearing manufacturing industry. Fafner Bearing, New Departure, and Timken and Barden were all in this area, and he moved into that, but in 1972, he sold it to his nephew, Dan Sirois, and two other employees. And they hired me in 78, but we'll get back to that in a second. And then in 1992, Dan's two partners decided to retire. And so I was able to buy out one of those partners. And eventually Dan retired, and I bought out the other partner in 2009. So kind of the history of the ownership of the company anyway. We, as I mentioned, we went into the bearing manufacturing industry, supplying tooling and gauging for them. And then we grew that to going into other industries and supporting other industries. So today, bearing manufacturers are still a key part of our customer base, but we do a lot in aerospace, medical, machine builders, defense. So we're pretty diversified as far as that's concerned.
Hold on one second. Maybe talk a little bit about what it is you guys do. Because I think most people think about manufacturers that make a part as opposed to make a tool to make parts. Sure. Or make gauges to measure the parts. So just for people that don't maybe follow that, people in the audience that aren't super familiar, maybe sort of explain your space in the industry and what it is you guys do versus making the actual products.
Sure. So other manufacturers who are making a product, whether that product be a ball bearing or a part for a firearm or an aerospace part, in order to machine that on their machines, they need a way to hold that part. They need a way to check that part. And that's the tooling and the fixtures and the gauges that we make for them so that they can do what they do.
And so, people hear about manufacturers that have like a tooling department. So does Sirois Tool work with only manufacturers that don't have their own internal tooling department or sometimes have that? Like kind of where do you guys fit into that?
Actually, it's a little of both because there's a lot of companies that have their own tooling department, which will concentrate on doing repair work and quick things that they need to keep production moving right away, but they'll still subcontract out a lot of the work to start with. So we do quite a bit with that. But some of our customers just don't have a tool room at all, and they just come to you guys to do any of the tooling. So if they get a new part that they need some new tooling, are you working with them to sort of figure out what the right tool for the job is? Do they already know what they need to do? That varies depending on the customer and the type of tooling or gauging that's needed. We don't really have a design department or a design capability, but we do help our customers quite a bit in making tooling efficient to manufacture. And they'll quite often call us, what material should I make this out of? And are these tolerances too tight, or can you do this and that type of thing? So we help them as much as we can.
And the gauging is for measuring the results?
Measuring the features of the part that they're machining to make sure that It's intolerance.
Got it right. Got to have the right thing to make it. Then you got to make sure it does what you think it's going to do, right?
That's right.
Nice. Sorry, I had got it in the way of sort of the background story. So you'd been through the ownership. What about you? How'd you get involved?
So I actually attended E.C. Goodwin Regional Vocational Technical School in New Britain, and I took mechanical drafting, not machining, which is a little bit of an interesting way to get into the owning a machine shop. But I from there I went to Fafner Bearings and was a tool design apprentice at Fafner Bearings. And after I finished that apprenticeship, Daniel Sirois, who was the primary owner of Sirois Tool. Well, there was 3 of them, but Dan called me up one day and wanted me to come down and visit him on a Saturday morning. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I talked to him during the week, but why Saturday morning? And well, it was to offer me a job. So, and that was 1978. And I worked there for 8 years, and I left and I went out on my own for a little while. I bought a Snap-on Tools franchise and tried sales. Realized I'm not a salesman, at least not that kind of salesman. I mean, I was okay with it, but it was not my thing. And then I went to law school, and while I was in law school, Dan Sirois called me and asked me to come back and buy out one of his partners, and that's how I ended up there back in 1992.
So you were there for 8 years and ended up through twists and turns going to law school.
So I was kind of what my wife called a professional student. So even though I right out of high school went to work at Fafner's and then to Sirois, I was going to school nights throughout all that time. Something a lot of kids should learn these days is that I never paid for college until law school. I never paid for college because my employers always paid for it. So I went to school nights, and I had gotten an associate's degree in accounting and a bachelor's in business, and then I was looking for, what's the next thing I want to do, and ended up choosing law school.
What was it about being a lawyer that initially enticed you?
Well, it's kind of the combination of running a business, being familiar with the accounting side of it and everything. I wanted to be a tax lawyer. That was my plan.
Really?
Yep. It got changed.
Yeah. What kind of brought you? So you had known Dan because they were
well, I had worked there for 8 years.
Right. But before that, you got the original job offer when you were at Fafner because Sirois was working for Fafner, and you sort of met him through that relationship.
That's correct.
And then you went to work there. So what made you decide, all right, forget tax accounting. Let me go back into manufacturing.
Well, I almost don't want to say it this way, but I always wanted to, be an owner of a business or be involved in that part of it, managing a business. And so when Dan called me, I was rushing my way through law school. I only had 4 classes left to take, and he called me and offered the opportunity. Well, first he asked me if I would come back to work for him, and I said no. And then he offered me the opportunity to buy into the company, and I said, okay, well, now you've got my interest. And ultimately I did, and I came back up and went right back to work and took my last 4 courses at Western New England College and went back to Florida and graduated with my class in law school.
So you did graduate?
Oh, yeah.
So did you ever but you've never practiced? Really.
No, I always intended to go take the bar as a backup, but I didn't need it.
I was going to say, I think we've proven that backup wasn't necessary.
Right.
Have you found that all that background has been useful in kind of growing the business? Because you got some really interesting background between the accounting, bachelor's in business, obviously, a law degree focused in tax law. Seems like that'd be really applicable.
Absolutely. I mean, what I've learned from all of that is enough to know to hire professionals. But at least I can talk to them intelligently, whether it's the accountant, the lawyer, or whoever. So
not try and do it all yourself.
Right.
Where did you come up with the scratch to be able to get to buy out someone in the business? Had you been saving up all this time? Did you borrow? How'd you make that work?
The retiring owners of Sirois Tool and Dan Sirois made it an offer I couldn't refuse. They did it. I will say my ex-partner Mark and I, when we came in '92 and became Danny's new partners, I mean, we were both in our 30s and we were really ambitious. And they set up a buyout plan that was supposed to take 7 to 9 years. And in 3.5 years, we had paid it off because we had doubled the revenue of the company. And, but we were pretty young and ambitious and did what we had to do.
Yeah. So coming in, what was your original plan to kind of grow the business? You had known it because you had been there for a number of years. Kind of talk us through that process. Like, what was your thought process around growing the business at that time?
Well, my part of that was more of the customer side, expanding our customer base, diversifying the company more. And my partner, Mark, his side was upgrading the shop. We started moving more into CNC equipment and other upgraded equipment and hiring key people and doing that. And that's how we did it.
Just basics.
The basics, absolutely.
Because a lot of people, I think, would hear you say, hey, bought a manufacturing business in New England in 1992. That's a tough slog, right? That was really NAFTA and everything's moving, but you guys found a way to make it work and be successful at it.
Right.
Was there
hard work? No, the harder I work, or luckier I get, or whatever. But it is all about hard work.
Yeah, putting together a plan and then sort of and then executing to it. Mm-hmm. When you think about the what the business does and who you guys serviced, has that changed much in the last 30 years that you've been owning the business?
Absolutely. In '92, we were still, I think, 70% the bearing industry. And today, the bearing industry is maybe 20% of our business. And so we've diversified significantly into other industries, which has certainly helped a lot when we've had downturns like 2008 and 2009 and even during this pandemic.
How did you guys think about doing that? It can be scary for folks who got a lot of, it's one customer is obviously a challenge, right? Customer concentration. But then industry can also be a challenge. How did you guys think about making that pivot without sort of losing the business, the great amount of business you had in the ball bearing industry, but also pivoting to expand? How did you guys execute that?
I don't think that was all that difficult. I mean, tooling is tooling, gauges are gauges. Yes, they're different, and yes, we had an intimate knowledge of the bearing industry ones, but it wasn't all that much different to start making tooling for somebody who's making a medical device or somebody who's making an aerospace part or a firearm or whatever. So I don't think it was all that difficult. It's precision tooling. We had to stick with our niche. I mean, that is one of the things you have to learn the hard way. We probably had to learn it the hard way a couple of times where, we started quoting stuff that maybe wasn't right in our wheelhouse, and then, either not winning it because we're way off base, or winning it and wishing we didn't. So, but if you stick to what you really know and what you can do well, then you can find that it grows other business. There's other industries and stuff that have the same kind of needs.
Was it hard to get a shot at your first medical device, tooling, your first aerospace, your first firearms? Was it hard to kind of get in there when you've been so long known in the bearing industry? Did you find that a challenge?
Yes, I think it was a challenge. I think you hit the first one. You said medical. I think that'd been the hardest. That was the hardest one to get into.
Because?
I think the companies that make medical devices were kind of entrenched with other, they had vendors that were already supporting them with that kind of thing and stuff. And it was really, it was just, we didn't know that business at all. So it was really hard to get in, but we did eventually. And, and honestly, I think most of the growth in our business has been because of word of mouth. And I will point to a perfect example in that realm is we had a good customer working at a automotive supply company that we were doing some work for that was located here in Connecticut. And one day he left that job and went to Colorado and went to work for a medical manufacturer and took over their tool room. And as soon as they ran out of capacity to do things, the first people they called was us. And so now all of a sudden we're in the medical business.
And then you can leverage that. So was some of it more of that, happenstance, being open to new opportunities, or did you and Mark sit down and sort of look and say, okay, we want to expand beyond bearings, who's tangentially related, and sort of take a strategic approach to it?
I think we tried to take a strategic approach, but to be honest with you, I think it was more about, maintaining our reputation and having those kind of opportunities where an engineer or a purchasing agent moved from one company to another, one industry to another, and opened up the doors for us. More recently, we're using, we're outsourcing prospecting and we've given this prospecting firm a target list of companies and industries that we feel that we could be good in, and that's helped. And that's it's a different market now. It used to be pretty much word of mouth and picking up the telephone. Now today it's other ways that they do with email marketing and letting the professionals do the prospecting.
Right.
And then we take over from there, so.
Get the introductions, and then you get in there and sort of have those more detailed conversations. Who are you usually talking to? Is it the head of the tool rooms? Is it the head of engineering? Like, who's your normal contact at a customer?
Engineering is probably primary. Tool room managers, and every company's a little different. Sometimes the tool room manager has a lot of say in where tooling gets sent to be made. Sometimes it's the engineers, and sometimes it really has to go through purchasing. But usually, if you can get in and have the engineers or the quality people or the tool room wanting to send us work, they can usually convince purchasing to give us a try at least, and then hopefully we support them well so that the purchasing's on board too.
Give us a shot and we'll show you how good we do it.
Right.
So when you think about, as you've kind of got into the business and you had to learn, do you participate in any trade associations? Do you have like other peers you work with? Like, how do you think about continuing to learn and improve your craft?
Well, that's a good thing. We've talked about Dan Sirois already, and Dan was definitely my mentor in the business world. And after he retired, there was definitely a hole there, and Mark and I were looking for something more, and we joined the National Tooling and Machining Association at that time. We got involved locally at first in the Connecticut chapter. CTMA. And I ended up serving on the board of CTMA for a while, and then we started attending national conferences, and I got involved in that, and were on a couple of their teams, including their budget and finance team, which kind of fit with my background, and eventually was asked to be on their what they call executive committee, but essentially board of directors for the National Association. And today I'm the chairman of the.
Look at you. That's awesome. And how have you found, what have you gotten out of that? Obviously that's been long years of participation. You talk a little bit about, what you've gotten from that and how it's helped you.
Sure. That's why I brought it up. I think the thing that was most important about being involved with NTMA was replacing that mentorship from Dan Sirois with a mentorship from being able to network with other companies, both locally here with the Connecticut chapter and then nationally with companies all around the country that are in the same industry. They're doing same kind of tooling and fixturing and precision machining. And I learned a lot from those people. And, somehow 20 years later, I'm the one that people are coming to and asking questions about, well, how do you handle this and how do you do that? And it's like, it's been an interesting transition because I still think of myself as one of the young guys, but I'm not.
Yeah, you got that. So you've invested a lot of time, both not just in attending the events, but getting yourself involved in the committees and the boards. Do you feel like that's enhanced your ability to learn by kind of getting involved at that level?
I think the connections I've made and the people I've become friends with through that have certainly helped me grow, but I also am doing it because I want to give back to the industry that has done so much for me. Yeah.
And having the ability to kind of hear what other people are doing, not just here locally, but nationally, I bet it's kind of giving you a whole different perspective. You take a little nugget from here, a little nugget from there, kind of mix it up with your own little juice and come out with something pretty amazing on the other end, I would think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it's all about, that networking. And sometimes that networking is in a formal session. And a lot of times that networking is at a cocktail reception after the formal sessions are over. And that's where you tend to make a lot of the friends, and learn a lot more.
Yeah, develop those relationships. What do you look at as some of the biggest challenges that you're facing as you continue to try and grow Sirois? Sounds like you've got some plans going for new lead generation. What are some of the other challenges you guys are trying to overcome these days?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that everybody's facing, it's probably been the same answer that you've heard from everybody else in this industry, is finding the skilled help that that you need to do it. We can buy all the machines in the world and use all the technology we want, and it helps. But it really comes down to having a good workforce, a good skilled people that want to be there and want to work. So that's the biggest challenge.
And how have you guys been trying to overcome that challenge? Because you're about mid-50s employees these days in hiring, I believe.
Yep, 54 and growing.
54 and growing.
So and we've had some good luck recently with hiring some good key people, and we're going to continue that. We still have a few more openings that we'd like to fill immediately, and hopefully growth will allow even more. One of the things that we've always done is try to offer the best benefits of anybody in the industry, which not everybody understands how valuable that is, but the ones that do understand it appreciate it and appreciate working for us because of that. So we still pay 100% of the premiums for health insurance for employees and their families.
Wow.
And not just health, but the dental, disability, life, all of that. We have a very generous 401k and profit sharing plan. I'm proud to say that we have better than average participation in that plan too, which is always good to hear. So that tells me that the employees appreciate it and they're glad that it's there for them. So that's a big part of how we attract employees. I mean, we've got to pay fair wages, obviously, along with those benefits. We have a lot of other intangible benefits like flex time. So if somebody is maybe a young family where maybe have to drop the kids off at school before they can come to work, or they have to pick the kids up after school, or 2 nights a week they got to go to a kid's baseball game. As long as we know what their schedule is going to be, they're allowed to put in their hours, within the hours that we're open, and so it's flexible schedule. That's a big one for a lot of younger families. So. And sometimes even for older families where it's going to see the grandkids' baseball game. So. I think we have a nice modern building that's clean and kept clean, and is in a nice location, and I'd like to believe it's a nice place to work. People enjoy working there.
Yeah, I mean, those are some amazing series of benefits. Is that something that you've been consciously spending a lot of time thinking about? How do we attract and retain the people that we can get in the business? That a lot of time spent doing that.
Yeah, every time the renewals come around for the health insurance and some of these other things, you look at that and you say, wow, 7% increase this year, 9% increase the next year, whatever, and you say, is this time to cut it? But the philosophy has been that this is what keeps our employees there, keeps people happy to be working for us. We can't cut that, no matter what it costs us, and we find ways to be more productive, because you can't always pass it on to the customers either. So
that's right.
You just have to find ways to be more productive with it. And I think our employees appreciate the benefits they have, so they help us find those ways to be more productive.
Do you kind of partner with them in those conversations and saying, hey guys, what can we do to get this productivity increased?
Yeah, it's not a direct conversation of here's what's happening with the health insurance, and so they'll do this. But yes, absolutely, we try to involve the employees, and it's great because when the ideas come from the shop floor up, they're definitely better accepted by everybody, and and people understand that we're listening to what they have to say and helping them find ways to do their job better. And so, those are usually the best ideas that we get. The stuff that comes from the top down, not so much.
Bottom up ideas, keys to success. Do you guys get involved with any, like you mentioned that you were an apprentice? Do you guys get involved with apprenticeship programs?
Yes, we've worked with Vinyl Tech in Middletown, and I think over the last 6 years, I believe we've hired 8 employees from their manufacturing technology program, and we put them right into usually we're hiring them in their junior year to come work part-time and during the summer break between junior and senior years. And immediately we sign them up with the state of Connecticut's pre-apprenticeship program. And then as soon as they graduate, they go into the full-blown apprenticeship program. The pre-apprenticeship just allows us to count those hours towards their apprenticeship. And because they come in with all the knowledge, the classroom education part of it already from that, it gives them an advantage. They get through that apprenticeship quicker. So we've done that with, I think we've hired 8, and I think 6 of them have actually finished and gone all the way through the apprenticeship program, got their journeyman certificate.
That's great.
And we reward them with a beautiful new Gerstner toolbox when they
get done.
Yep.
What are some of the other stuff you guys are doing? You're running the apprenticeship program. You've talked about the benefits. What about in terms of finding the people? Anything else out there in terms of using referral programs with the employees? Are you taking advantage of any of the other state programs? Like, where are you helping to find folks?
Well, we do have a referral program where employees can refer other potential employees, and and that's worked to some extent. But I think the The greatest bang for the buck we're getting right now is actually with Goodwin University. We've hired several people that have graduated through their manufacturing program, and they've worked out very well. The difference between a high school student going to a vocational school and somebody who's already graduated and maybe had a job and then using their own money signed up to take a manufacturing program at Goodwin University, they're definitely even more motivated to do well in the field.
So partnering with Goodwin's been a big success.
Yes, absolutely.
Sounds like you guys are doing what we've been encouraging a lot of people to do, which is great, which is sort of partnering with some of these educational institutions out there. Because there's a lot of people, whether it's the tech schools or Goodwin, trying to help educate people to get them started in manufacturing. It seems like Sirois Tools is really taking advantage of all that.
Yes.
That's awesome. And once they get started, I think for people that are watching, there's a giant Sirois tool box on the thing. Maybe you want to talk about what this box is and why it's so cool.
Well, what this box is the box that every new employee receives, usually a few days before they start their employment here. And in that box, there'll be 3 T-shirts, a hat, a coffee mug, a water bottle, and not in this box that I'm giving to Ari, but in the box that actually goes to employees, there's a welcome letter with some more information about the company and some basic information about benefits. They get all that on day one with the orientation, and then there's usually a couple of bags of snacks and some other things and whatever. We fill the box as full as we can get it, and then usually try to either mail it off to their house ahead of time, or we get them to come in to pick something up a couple days before, and we hand them the box. And so, it's just kind of one of those little things that I have to give credit to my HR manager, Cheryl Huck. She's the one that ran with this idea and has put it together like this, and she. The first couple she put together were just in a regular plain old box, and she says, "Nah, we can't do that. We need a box branded." And she had these boxes made, and that's what we do.
That's just great. So important, I think, to get people started off on the right foot, right, feeling special, right from day one. And you're not even waiting for day one. They get it ahead of time, feel like part of the family.
Well, and many of those employees end up walking in first day with their Sirois Tools T-shirt on. We just hired a new accounting manager, and even she came walking in.
Is that right?
Sirois Tools T-shirt.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Any other stuff you guys think about from an onboarding perspective? Something we haven't talked about too much on the podcast, but I think it's really smart and important. Something I've done, in my business is making sure people feel special, right on day one, and just making sure that it's not an afterthought, that we spend some time to really make sure they're getting started on the right foot, which I think sets the tone. This box is great. You mentioned orientation. I don't know, any other thinking around that? Seems like you've really embraced that, getting them started on the right foot.
Yeah, I think we do all of that. So yes, they come in, they have orientation, and we've learned that if we go through all of the safety and ITAR and everything else, the stuff that they have to learn, if we try to do it all in one day, their very first day, it's overwhelming. So we've been breaking it up into 2 days or even 3 days sometimes. Let them spend a few hours with that, and then get some time out on the shop floor and do that, depending on the level of experience and everything that the employee's coming in with. But either Cheryl, our HR manager, or the department manager for whatever department that they're going to work in, will usually take them around and introduce them to everybody in the company the first day, which is key. I mean, you're not going to remember all the names. There's no way they're going to remember all the names, but they're going to meet everybody, and they're going to see faces that they'll at least recognize the next day, So try to make them feel, part of the team.
So important, right? Because if you want to find them, then you want to keep them and have them be really engaged. So
absolutely.
hugely important. I wanted to sort of take it to a little bit of back to a business direction, because it's something that I found out about kind of prepping for our time today. That Sirois has done some acquisitions over time, and you've spent some time shopping around for acquisitions. I think I'd like to talk that through. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I'd love to spend some time on that, because it's in the air and the water, whatever. I'm sure anyone who's been in manufacturing is, over the last several decades, but in particular the last few years, with PE firms everywhere, I'm hearing about companies being bought, sold, whatever. Talk through kind of your thought process around your experience maybe with acquisitions.
Sure. Kind of really started in the early 2000s. A business broker had brought us an opportunity to buy a gauge company that was kind of related, and we talked to them, and we actually made an offer on that company, and they turned us down. And we thought, well, geez, what did we do wrong here? And 2 years later, they came back to us, and they hadn't sold the company yet, and they came back, and we said to the broker, the only way we're going to do this is we're going to have a sit down face to face with the current owners, find out what it is that's important to them, and then we can hopefully tailor an offer that will work. And we did that, and ultimately that's when that's Dow Gauge, and we bought it from Peter and Susie Dow, who it was Dow Mechanical Corp when they owned it. It was in Enfield. And it was a perfect fit for us because everything they manufactured, the gauge product that they manufactured, was a perfect fit for our manufacturing equipment and people, and it was a great fit. And Peter signed a deal to continue to work for us for 3 more years after that deal in 2005, and he's still working for us today.
Is that right?
Part-time. He's still the face of Dow Gauge to many of the customers, and he comes up with the concepts for the gauges, and then we take it from there and make the drawings and make the parts and ship them off to the customers. And when Peter's there in the office, he still likes to see every job before it goes out. So it was great. And over the years, we've looked at dozens of other potential acquisitions and dozens. Oh yes, absolutely. And maybe we were a little too picky. I don't know, but the thing is, we did eventually make one other one in 2012. We bought a company that was called All 5 Tool, but we mainly bought it because of their North American spring tool division, which makes tooling for spring manufacturers. So anybody that's coiling springs needs tooling for their coiling machines, and that's what North American Spring Tool makes, and that's just a division of Sirois Tool today. We hired a good portion of their workforce. They were in Bristol, and moved them to our location in Berlin, and moved the equipment that we needed to do it, and have upgraded a bunch of that equipment since. But it was another great acquisition that has helped us continue to grow the company. And we continue to look at other acquisitions. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday about one, but probably going to pass on that one too. But no sense in getting into businesses that aren't a really good fit with us. But the 2 acquisitions that we made were, and it was in both cases it was a great way for the owners of those businesses to get out of the responsibility of owning the business. Like I said, Peter still works for us today and enjoys what he does, but he got away from the responsibility of owning the business and having employees and all of that. And the owners of All 5 Tool, North American Spring Tool, were ready to retire and did retire. So
there's an opportunity for them to transition. So I think it's great. I want to just dig in a little bit here, because I think there's sometimes people feel like, oh man, I can't get into this way of growing the business unless we're a huge corporation or whatever. But you guys have made a success out of it. I mean, you say maybe you've been too picky. I think it's hard to imagine being too picky. I mean, at least my experience in M&A is the way you go wrong is the wrong deal. It's hard to go wrong not doing something, doing the wrong one. What gave you sort of the courage to do it? And maybe talk through kind of how you've thought about when to go forward and when to pass.
Okay, well, for the last part of your question, when to go forward and when to pass, I think it really comes down to what are the synergies with the business. When we looked at Dow Gauge, we immediately saw that we could manufacture the parts that to these gauges, and we could do it efficiently. And we also realized that a lot of their customers could be our customers. In fact, going back to the diversification of the company, we really were not doing anything in the firearms industry until we bought Dow Gauge, who was doing a lot of work in the firearms industry. So it made the connections, and now Sirois Tool does quite a bit of work in that industry with fixtures and gauges. And it all came out of the Dow Gauge acquisition. So we had multiple synergies in that application. And I think the same thing was true when we bought North American Spring Tool. There was a bunch of common customers even in that industry, so where there was stuff that were, yes, they're coiling springs, but they're also doing other things that they need other tooling for and gauges for that we either were already making or could be making for them. So there was some good synergy there as far as that's concerned. And the processes used to manufacture that tooling is the same processes we used in Sirois Tool to make the tooling for the bearing industry and for others. So we had you have to have those synergies. If you just buy a business, if we were to go out and buy a business that that was a stocking distributor of some industrial product. It's a totally different business. We don't know how to be a stocking distributor. We know how to be a manufacturer.
And so you're kind of looking at where are those synergies at, and like how tight do those? I mean, you've laid out some pretty amazing synergies in the two that you've done. I mean, are you waiting? Is that like the perfect fit? Is that all you go for? Is there variances? Because you've obviously walked away from dozens. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where I said maybe we've been too picky. Maybe there were some that were close enough that we could have made it work, but it didn't click. The thing is, we don't have to grow through acquisitions.
Right.
Most of our growth has been internally,
right.
And we've been able to do that. And we've been able to do it successfully without having to go into a lot of debt to do it, because we can upgrade our equipment every year. We can spend a significant amount of money every year from cash flow and not having to go borrow money every time. Whereas if we were trying to make a $3 million acquisition, obviously you'd have to run to the bank. So today we're debt free and growing still.
Wow, that's fantastic. What about on the culture side? I mean, you guys have talked about some stuff you do that I think is pretty unique about how you kind of treat your employees, the people you're looking to hire, the benefits you provide. What do you think about that when you look at some of these other companies you're evaluating, probably not doing the same things, maybe don't have the same values? How does that enter into your?
Well, it enters into the equation when you're thinking about whether you can make a profitable acquisition out of it, because if they're showing you numbers and they're fairly profitable and that looks great, but then you look at it and you say, well, they're barely paying their employees. They're not, a fair wage, and they're not offering all the benefits that we're going to offer when we hire those employees, because if we make this acquisition, so we have to look at that in the numbers and say, once we give these employees the same kind of benefits our employees get, give them all the benefits that our other employees have, will this still be a profitable acquisition? So we do have to look at it that way. Certainly the companies that we have acquired, the employees who have come to work for us have been happy about.
I bet. So what gave you the courage to do it, to start doing it in the first place?
I don't know.
just time to go.
I mean, I think, the ambition of, wanting to grow the business, wanting to make a mark and do it. And I think as long as we're doing that and being ethical and being, moving in the right direction, not doing it. It's not all just about the money. I mean, the money's kind of just the way those things are measured, but it's not really what it's about. It's, most of my employees would consider me their friend, and that's the way I'd like it to be. And most of my customers consider me a friend too. So, that's what we want. That's what we want to do in business. And as long as we can make money doing it and our customers are happy and are able to make money using our tools and fixtures and gauges, then and our employees are supporting their families. I mean, isn't that what it's all about?
That is what it's all about. And Alan, on that note, I'm going to leave it there from our interview part of the conversation. I'm going to move us to rapid fire round of questions. That was really well said, Alan. I appreciated that. You ready for some rapid fire?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
I'm not into baseball.
All right, fair enough. Neither. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Dunkin'.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Exotic destination.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Sports car.
Do you have a favorite business book?
Ooh. I read a lot of them. I mean, I read a lot, and I try to go one fiction and one business or self-help book, but try to pick out one. I can't.
Fair enough. We'll leave it there. If you had to do something other than be CEO of Sirois Tool, you had to, but it could be anything in the whole world, what would you do?
If you had asked me that question 20 years ago, I would have said tax lawyer, but I'm not sure I would want to go there today. I think today I would like to, and hopefully still will be a business coach, help other businesses, do the kind of mentoring that Dan Sirois did for me, and that the friends that I've made at NTMA have done for me. So.
Oh, that's cool. What's something, Alan, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
Be honest. I mean, whether that's at home with your parents, or early on, or whether it's you're in business and you just scrap the part for a customer, and instead of calling them up and making up some kind of lie about why they're not getting their part, tell them the truth. The truth, you can't forget the truth.
Absolutely.
You can forget
true.
the lie and then really mess up, but you can't forget the truth.
Can't forget the truth. What's one thing, Alan, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back and tell young Alan, and if he'd listen to you, you'd think have a real positive impact on his life?
Well, public speaking and doing things like this are not that hard.
Yeah.
A lot of people, everybody says they're an introvert, or a lot of people do. And definitely I would use the excuse that I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk in front of people. I don't want to have a conversation like we're even having today, knowing that there's a camera pointing at me. But when it comes down to it, it's really not that hard. I said to you before this started, I was nervous. It's not that you don't get nervous doing it. It's just, I think if I could have maybe there's more I could have done if I was a little more extroverted, or a little less afraid of being in public, speaking in public.
Just getting a little bit out of your comfort zone. Tell you a little secret. I've done a lot of these, Alan. I get nervous every single time. Listen, it has been awesome having you on. Congratulations to all the great stuff you guys are doing at Sirois Tool. I wish you tons of success, and hopefully you'll come back and talk to us again.
I would love to. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.